Hey, what's going on, classes? Mr. Hayes here with another asynchronous video here this week. This is a video that may not apply to everyone's article. It may only apply to some, but it's very important to establish your credibility as a journalist. And that's acknowledging the other side of an argument. That's acknowledging a different perspective on your topic. You may think to yourself, well, how will that help you make your case? But actually, you get more credence as a journalist if you do acknowledge the other side, more credibility because it's shown that you've taken in all different kinds of perspectives, all different kinds of arguments. Your research has taken you to different directions and you've established and settled on your own angle and your own viewpoint. When you can prove that you've taken everything into account, you actually gain credibility. So it's okay to briefly acknowledge the opposite perspective, a different angle, a different viewpoint on your topic before you quickly come back to yours. That's okay. Now, again, this may not apply to yours. If you have not come across a source through your research that does acknowledge a different perspective or different angle, then you can go ahead and skip this and just stick to your angle 100% all the way through. That's okay. You don't have to force this. But if you do come across a source or you want to spend some time looking for one that takes a different side, this is a great lesson to keep in mind and apply it to your article. Maybe you are doing a biography on someone, and while you are showering them with accolades and you're trying to prove how amazing of a person this historical figure, this athlete was, you did come across a source in your research that shows that maybe they have a different side to them that's not so great, and you want to at least acknowledge that. Or maybe it's a historical event or a scientific topic where it contradicts the angle you're taking. It's okay to mention that in your article. It's actually a good thing, believe it or not. So as you know, I'm doing the connection between Topsy the elephant and Thomas Edison and how Edison had his hands in Topsy's death and many other animals' death to prove that his form of electricity was safer than a rival's form. If you remember back on Monday of last week, when I showed you how to do research on your topic and some um, strategies for using Google and Wikipedia, I came across this Rutgers University article. Actually looks like this, which is Mythbuster, did Edison really electrocute Topsy the elephant? And it actually shows in that article that Thomas Edison did not have anything to do with Topsy's death, that it was kind of a myth. And so I could just take that source and say, I'm not going to use it. I'm going to throw it in the trash. I'm not going to acknowledge it because I'm taking the opposite viewpoint that they were connected. But instead, I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to show that I did read it. I did look it through. I decided that it was not true for the angle I'm taking, but I'm still going to mention it. That's a good thing for a journalist to do. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a way that acknowledges the other side, but takes you back to your angle pretty quickly. So it's an EDU website, which also makes me want to use it because I know it's credible from Rutgers. There are kind of three main points here that I captured in my notes that show that Edison did not have any involvement in this. One, it says in the article that Edison is not mentioned in any of the newspaper accounts of the killing of Topsy. You'd think someone that famous, really well known, if he had his hand in it, would be mentioned. So that's curious. There's no evidence that anyone at Luna Park, the SPCA, or the Brooklyn Illuminating Company, which all had something to do with Topsy's execution that day, consulted him. You think if Thomas Edison's sending his film company and he wanted this done, he had a big say in it that they would have consulted someone that intelligent and that renowned. And also the day-to-day operations of the film were actually at that point, the film company were in the hands of the general manager and vice president, William Gilmore. Edison was not making the decisions. So all three of those things, and there's actually many others within this article, but those are the three I captured in my notes, would make it seem that maybe Edison wasn't as involved as we might think. I'm not going to change my angle. I'm still going to go in my article with the fact that Topsy and Edison were connected because 90% of my sources tell me that they were. But I am going to go ahead and acknowledge this side of it. How do I do that? Well, I gave you some sentence stems that I think might really help you, some sentence starters. And I have it right here in my module on how to acknowledge the other side on the left with the sentence stems. On the other hand, one might say, I will admit that the only time when it has to be mentioned that, to be fair, and I must acknowledge that. And then rebuttal sentence stems, how to acknowledge the other side, but then quickly in the rebuttal, go back to your angle. However, nevertheless, this still doesn't, still, and this doesn't mean. You can use any of these that you think fit within your article. So I'm going to compose a paragraph here using these sentence stems and acknowledging the other side while quickly forming my rebuttal and going back to my perspective. So I might say here, I'll zoom in a little bit. As I start with one of my counterclaim sentence stems, I might say, it has to be mentioned that, and I'm going to go back to what I did with my research and my source. It has to be mentioned that, curiously, Thomas Edison, all of his fame and fortune, was not mentioned in any of the first person newspaper accounts from that January day, nor was he spearheading, kind of a bigger word for leading, nor was he spearheading the Edison, nor was he spearheading his own film company at the time. By 1903, William E. Gilmore, the vice president and general manager, was the primary decision maker. And the other one was that there's no evidence that any of these people consulted him. Additionally, there's no evidence that anyone at Luna Park consulted Edison directly or right before, or I'll say leading up to these demise. Now, the only thing I'm missing here is I've got my sentence stem. The only thing missing here is giving credit to the source. So I'm going to say that, we'll say that right in my first sentence here. And I'll use my paraphrase attribution technique from the previous page of the module, the previous video. According to the Thomas Edison papers at Rutgers University. Okay. Now, while I've acknowledged the other side, I want to rebut it with using one of these sentence stems over on this side. However, so how would I argue against this? Well, I've done a ton of research on the fact that there was a connection. So I'm going to go back to my slideshow here, look through and figure out which source would fit best for showing that while some of these things may be true, it's not enough to change my mind on the issue that Thomas Edison was involved. However, one wouldn't expect, I got a little delay here. One wouldn't expect someone as famous and revered as Edison to want his name associated with such a violent and cruel act. And Gilmore surely wouldn't be acting alone in any decisions related to Edison's film company. Just because Luna Park did not consult Edison, actually, I'm going to rephrase that. Luna Park being a separate entity means kind of its own separate thing. It doesn't necessarily have to consult with Edison on anything. It's under no obligation to consult Edison on this decision and how to go forward with its execution. Okay. I've got however as my sentence stem here. So you can see here how, as a journalist, I'm able to acknowledge the other side with a counterclaim sentence stem, but quickly rebut it with my own thoughts on it that's guided by the research that I've done on the topic.